On this YouTube channel, we made a variety of videos in which we share some tips for your webinar camera composition. However, I still feel like it's a little bit of an uncharted territory, so in this video I will share with you 5 tips for your webinar camera composition. Let's go! And the first thing I want to talk about is the rule of thirds. And the rule of thirds is sort of a rule of thumb for visual images such as design, films and videos. And basically it means that you divide your composition into 9 equal parts created by 2 horizontal and 2 vertical lines. And to show you what that means and what you can do with those lines, I asked Demo Walter to stand as a model so we can actually see what this rule of thirds thing does and is. So I'm going to switch to the camera of Demo Walter. There he is. As you can see, right now we have 9 squares, we have 4 dots in the middle. And of course we do have the same lines. What you can do is you can use these lines, dots and squares to position your subject, which in this case is Demo Walter. For example, the rule I always use using the rule of thirds is to place the eyes of the subject, in this case Demo Walter, on the top line and right into the middle. This way you always have enough headspace, but it doesn't look very zoomed in or zoomed out. And as you can see, Demo Walter is just standing there pretty nicely and it's nice to watch. And that is the thing that I forgot to mention, is the rule of thirds is actually there to create a nice relaxing camera image. So no weird shots, and it's actually nice for your eyes to look at. That's why the rule of thirds was created and invented. So right now Demo Walter has his eyes perfectly on the top line, but let's say for example I have a presentation right next to me. If I have a presentation right next to me, you might notice from our product update cycle videos, I can set Demo Walter, the middle of his face, into the top left dot of the rule of thirds. So right now it's still great to look at and I have enough space for my presentation. The second thing I want to talk about is framing. And framing means is how large your subject is in comparison to the background. So Demo Walter is still standing there and you can do a lot with the camera positioning. So you can create a bird's eye or a worm's eye view. And you might think, worm's eye view? I thought we were talking about camera. This sounds very biological. No, let me explain. Because we all know the bird's eye view, which means that the camera is very, very high in comparison to your object or your subject. What worm's eye view means, since a bird is of course high, so he has to look down, and that's the position that the camera is in. A worm, on the other hand, is always on the ground, so a worm has to always look up. So the camera points up. So bird's eye view is the camera points down, and the worm's eye view is the camera pointing up. But that's not the only thing. You also need to think is how far your camera is zoomed in or how far your camera is close or away from your subject. So you can create different shots. And of course, there are some terminology for that as well. You might have heard of them. You have a wide shot, you have a medium shot, and you have a close-up. But you also have some in-betweens, like extreme wide or medium close-up, or a detail shot even, or something similar like a knee shot, for example, or a full portrait, which means from your head all the way down to your feet. And of course, Demo Walter is still patiently waiting for him to switch to the camera so I can actually show you these shots. So right now you're looking at Demo Walter, who is medium, and right now you are looking at a close-up. This is of course really, really handy, and especially if you want to say a certain message, it's really good to think about how large you are or how large your background is. Because if you're telling a very, very intimate and emotional story, you might want it to be a little bit closer to your face, whereas you are explaining something, you might want to show more of your own body in order to show more authority, so to say. Not very authoritative, but you show more authority since you show more of your entire body. The third thing that I want to talk about are your camera settings. And right now I want to focus on the main 3 just to keep it nice and easy for this video. The 3 that I wanted to mention are the ISO, your iris and your shutter speed. But before I'm going to explain it and show you what it looks like on camera, I want to tell you a small funny story, because outside of WebinarGeek I also do some productions as well. And past Sunday I was at a production where there were some younger people as well who want to become like broadcast operators or camera guys. And because I was one of the more experienced ones, they asked me, hey, this camera 4, setting is very weird. It's dark, but it's also very grainy, so could you please take a look at it? And I was like, sure, fine, it's probably just the iris that is all the way closed, or there's some shutter speed. But no, those 3 settings were all just wrong. The ISO was cranked up all the way to the top, the iris was completely closed, and the shutter speed was some weird setting. And that's what happens a lot, is that people don't consider those 3 combined. So they usually focus on one. For example, when it's very, very bright, I know a lot of people tend to close the iris all the way up, even though it might be an ISO problem or it might be a shutter speed. So what I'm trying to mention is those are the 3 most important, and always think about those 3. So don't change one setting, just level it and balance it out across those 3. So right now I'm going to explain what those 3 actually mean. And the first one I want to talk about is the ISO. And ISO is actually an abbreviation of International Standardization Organization. And in this case, it's a standard for light sensitivity. Because the ISO is nothing more than sort of a number for your light sensitivity. And of course, how higher the number, how higher the sensitivity, which means that you can capture more light. However, so to say, and let's make it easy, like I mentioned, if you set the ISO too high, and I think you know what this looks like, if you set the ISO way too high, your camera image gets very, very grainy. It gets a little bit dotty. And don't worry, I will ask Demo Walter to show you with a camera so you can actually see what these settings does as all the way high and all the way low. The second that I want to mention is your camera iris. And your camera iris is actually pretty similar to your own eye iris. Eye iris. Okay, that's difficult. To your own eye iris. And that means that it can open and close depending on your lighting situation. And your iris on your camera is actually the shutters that close and open. So it depends on how open your iris is, which means that it can catch a lot of light. And when your iris is all the way down, it means that it can't. So as you can see, it's actually the shutters that close and open. Speaking about shutters, let's go to the third one, the shutter speed. Shutter speed is also known as exposure time, and exposure time is a lot easier to explain than shutter speed, so to say, because the exposure time is pretty self-explanatory. Right now I'm using a mirrorless camera, so the light comes directly onto the sensor, and that is actually, especially while taking photos, that is actually what the shutter speed is. So the shutter speed or exposure time is literally how long your camera sensor is exposed to light. You might have seen the videos, or you might have seen the photos where it's completely dark and someone with a very small light drew a smiley. Well, let me show you an example right here. And that is one example that you can create with a very, very, very long exposure time, because a lot of light went into the camera and it took a very long time to close all those shutters. So the camera had a lot of time to capture a lot of different lighting and then set it on to your electronic signal on your SD card, so to say. And in a demo, it looks like this. The fourth thing I want to mention in this video is sunlight. And I think I already said that in another video on this YouTube channel, but every camera operator knows is that sunlight can be your best friend, but also your worst enemy. Now, how can sunlight be your best friend? Think about pictures you take when the sun is going down. You know your camera settings, so you can create very beautiful cinematic photos and videos using depth of field and working with the sunlight. And if you know what you are doing, you can do a really, really awesome stuff while working with sunlight and no other lighting equipment except your camera settings. But it can also be your worst enemy. Right now, like I mentioned, I'm in the WebinarGeek studio, but every morning I have to go by train to the office, and every morning as well at 9 o'clock we have our stand-up, and I do that stand-up always in the train. However, sometimes, and it's very, very funny because someday I'm like so bright and the camera image is so bright because there's so much sunlight coming in from the back of the camera, that it's just all bright and it looks like white light, and I'm going to ascend to up there to above. Any other times the sunlight comes from the wrong way and I'm just a very, very black silhouette. So that is one of the things where your camera, or sorry, where your sun can be your worst enemy. So please keep in mind that the best thing you can do in order to work with sunlight is avoid it entirely if you can. Like I mentioned, everything around me is black. I have black curtains, but even though I have black curtains, I also taped the windows with black tape just to avoid the sunlight as much as possible. The fifth thing I want to talk about is the use of software. And on this YouTube channel, I've made 2 awesome videos in OBS where I do a deep dive in everything you can change in OBS to your camera image and compositioning. So I do a lot more deep dive on the ISO, on the iris, which you can all change in OBS as well. And this is especially great if you're not that of a hardware technical person, so to say. And for example, you just want a bigger camera image in OBS, you can just drag your camera image bigger, so you don't have to worry about zooming and setting the focus and all that kind of stuff. So software can be very easy to use, as I say in that OBS video as well. So besides good lighting in your studio, knowing the basic camera settings, you can also do a lot with software. So I highly recommend that you watch those videos as well. And that's it, 5 tips for you to create a better webinar camera image. If you enjoyed this video and you want to learn more about webinars and how to host them, what gear to use and what does it like to work at a tech startup, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click like on this video and hit that notification bell. And let me know, what is your favorite tip to create a better camera image? Thank you so much for watching and see you on the next one. Bye!